real world examples of digital transformation. That was a great overview of the people, processes, and programs, but there's nothing that paints a picture quite as well as a really good case study. So now we're going to take a look at 3 digital transformation case studies. And one of those focuses on edge computing, and one focuses on the plant floor, and one on the enterprise. So Kent, can you talk about the first case study? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So the first example we want to talk about is about a project that DSI did, which is one of our premier integrators, specifically for Ennis-Flint. Ennis-Flint is a leading maker in pavement marking solutions. And so Ennis-Flint had developed a new continuous mixing process for a material that is produced in single batch kettle mixers. And for this batch, they use up to 20 different raw material feeders to continuously feed the mixer at the correct ratios. So any fluctuations in this feed rate or any of the feed rates could result in a bad product. And this presented a few challenges for them. How do they assist their operators with running a process with so many variables? How do they monitor those mixers to avoid fluctuations? All that kind of stuff. And they realized that they needed to take advantage of some things like digital transformation to try to make this go smoothly. And so they were able to leverage Ignition as the program for that, one of the programs. And so what they did is they connected Ignition to each of the feeders and started recording trends on all of the outputs. And they put these trends on HMI screens where many people could easily access the data. It's like, okay, that's pretty basic, right? Just throwing things up on a trend screen, and putting it in front of people. Turns out, as they did so, they found that feeder 5 was recording small momentary increases in weight when the feeder should have been losing weight. And as a result, the PID loop controlling the flow out of the feeder would overfeed the materials, causing a spike in agitator current and resulting in a bad product at the end of the day. And so these small bumps in weight were determined to be the root cause, or the root cause of this was the motor current faults were resulting in a bad product. And so there was an issue with the shield grounding that was discovered. And they made some changes within the PLC modification to make up for this, and they made the system less susceptible to bad weight data. And this was all easily identifiable because they put all this data into Ignition and started visualizing it. And that led them to the resolution of the issue. And as part of this, you say, okay, well that's easy, but it took them some steps to get there, because these are all remote mixers out in the field. And so how do they get all this data up in front of people? Well, they were able to leverage a hub and spoke architecture. They used Ignition Edge running locally. They had 3 of these sites, and they had a PLC at each, and they were able to connect Ignition. Sorry, they had Ignition on board from these OnLogic IPCs. So they had Ignition Edge running locally, and they were able to take that data and publish it up to a central Ignition gateway in the cloud. And by doing this, they're able to create a much more heavily automated system that lets the customer automate the flow of recipe information and material consumption in their ERP, because then they took that central gateway and they connected it to their ERP system, which was SAP, and now they're able to manage their whole process from a single interface rather than having a bunch of disparate systems. So what did this project look like? Well, they had about 4,000 tags that were logging about 2 million rows of historical data per day to 2 cloud databases that were Microsoft SQL Server with always-on availability. And they had about 10 to 20 users, clients looking at this data daily. After they got all that infrastructure in place of how we have data collection at the sites, we push that data up to a centralized system, we integrate it with other software as need to. Then it was about, we've got these 10 to 20 people who want to look at it. What are they looking at? They leveraged the perspective module because they really wanted this to be mobile responsive and dynamic, and they wanted to allow people to pull this up on their phones, any type of screen. And perspective allowed them to do that. They were able to build it in a completely dynamic fashion, and then based on the equipment located on premise, it allows rapid addition of new equipment with little or no changes to the perspective application. And the design allowed for cost-effective scalability as well as a cleaner and more consistent product. This new infrastructure also allowed Ennis-Flint to add new mixing systems into the perspective application in hours instead of days or weeks as it was taking them previously. And so the perspective application was built using native theming, leveraging reusable elements for styling the product. If you go actually watch their case study, they also talk about being able to switch between a light mode and dark mode helped people buy into this because people are particular about how they like to view things, and just being able to switch to a dark mode made some of their users happy and actually allowed them to use the product. But throughout all of this, we get the data up to a centralized system. How do people actually access it? How do you secure that when it's going to a phone? And Perspective allows for that too. So any authenticated employee was able to securely access this project from anywhere using any device. And I won't go too much into their security paradigm here, but when you're going into the cloud, you can create DMZs, you can have reverse proxies behind load balancers, you can have all these different things, to secure that data. And of course, using role-based security and zone-based security and all those other standard features of Ignition to make sure that you're not letting bad actors, access this data. But once they had put all that in place, employees could check the same details at home with their phone or tablet without losing any application functionality. And they no longer needed to be in their office or on their laptop to respond and oversee things. So it's about getting the right data to the right people at the right time so they can make intelligent decisions. And to do that, Ignition helped them collect the data securely, publish the data to the cloud, and then provide a secure interface for people to access that data wherever they are. And then one other comment about this project, DSI wanted to make sure that the development of this program went really smoothly. And traditionally, people have had to be on site for development, or they have a VPN tunnel in, but maybe they're doing development against production systems with production data, and if you do something wrong during that development, it can cause downtime, things like that. And so DSI actually used Docker to create several Ignition images that can rapidly deploy and recreate the whole customer's environment, so that developers can spin up an exact copy of the customer's environment locally and test changes and fixes thoroughly before introducing them into a staging environment and then migrate those to a production environment. And so Docker drastically reduced the overhead development time because it gave everyone on the team the same ease of access to the entire project. And then, when moving into staging, no one had to worry about the naming conventions, schemes, or connection paths that may be different between the simulated environment and the production one, because they made them all exact matches. And so this makes the system more reliable and ensures that when the changes are pushed onto production, they're ready for prime time. And they talked a lot about, making this a digital twin, that all the simulations, all the things in the background were exact matches. So this whole project by DSI really shows the importance of edge and digital transformation, collecting the data where it's at, making sure that you're bringing the right data up to a centralized system, and then there you can make these decisions. And so, yeah, really excited about what DSI and Ennis-Flint were able to accomplish. With that, I'll turn it back to Don to show how digital transformation can improve things on the plant floor.
Thank you very much. That was great. Really appreciate you going through that detail on that. Yeah, the plant floor, SugarCreek. SugarCreek is a packaged foods manufacturer. They've got like 50 years of growth and success to their name. And their growth has been accelerated in the last several years. And Ignition supports and keeps up with that company's sort of rapid new growth demands. For example, SugarCreek needs plant floor data to identify and solve problems across its 6 manufacturing sites. And before Ignition, the information they had was usually a day old, which can be really critical. It was really hard to get real-time data. But Ignition allows them to have information in a usable context and format. It actually gives them full visibility to everything going on at each manufacturing line, and all of this in real time. So this data access actually helps SugarCreek and its managers to make data-driven decisions and save costs and improve their efficiency. As was mentioned earlier, really, when you get to the people end of it, it's people that end up doing these insights and people that end up making the decisions that can really improve efficiency working with programs and processes. So it really gives them a lot of useful data that they can share with their customers. Additionally, I would say that Ignition has really helped SugarCreek with a continuous improvement approach in their OT-IT convergence. In fact, the company's IT director said Ignition gives us shared platform, so it's easy to share information. When they started out in the very beginning, they actually showed Ignition to the management team, and the OT team really just downloaded Ignition trial. They modeled a production line in trial, no cost, and they showed them what the capabilities were before they even had to buy anything. So SugarCreek has constantly expanded the ignition role across its company. It's now used in virtually all aspects of the operations. And since adopting ignition, SugarCreek has reached record productivity. It's seen 100% improvement in OE just over the 7 months. And in talking with Dan Stoff from SugarCreek, he sees the continuous movement of that and continuous improvements in productivity as they continue to go on their digital transformation journey. And in addition to that, when you talk about people, their culture has also evolved. They've seen ideas and engagement and innovation coming from more people in the company than ever before. People who really hadn't been involved in problem solving before are now getting involved in problem solving, which really increases the capability of the company because they're taking advantage of all that expertise of the team that they have assembled there. And that's what's real, in my word, if you want real successful digital transformation, that's what it looks like. It really digs into the people, the processes, and the programs in combination to accomplish that overall goal. And I think you could really get a good look at this also with our next case study. So that's kind of SugarCreek and the plant floor, but Kevin, why don't you take it over and talk about the next one?
Sure thing. This is one that I'm excited about, that I've worked with these guys for a number of years, actually. And their story is an interesting one. So this is RJ Reynolds, which is now part of British American Tobacco. And they're a great example of enterprise digital transformation. So doing it on a really large scale with a lot that's happening. But they didn't always, they didn't start large. The company basically faced many serious challenges, including a shrinking market, intense regulatory scrutiny, and negative perceptions about their industry. This really put pressure on the manufacturing side of the company to deliver superior results. They built a vision for digitally connected enterprise with a large infrastructure that connected controls, MES, and ERP with heavy automation between the layers. Eventually, Reynolds became aware of ignition and were impressed with it, but they thought there had to be a catch and they weren't really sure exactly how to implement it and what to do with it. They then got some new machines to manufacture new product, but the machines had constant problems. The maintenance and engineering teams were working on them every day, but the problems persisted. The company's director of technical services was told to figure out how to get data from the machine so they could determine where the bottlenecks were. He was given 1 week, a PC, and $12,000 to buy an ignition license. Within a week, they collected data, built rudimentary screens, and helped them see where the bottlenecks were. That's when they realized that ignition was not just an HMI or a historian, and they could do a lot more with it. Since then, Reynolds has done a tremendous number of big ignition projects across the enterprise. They've deployed ignition at more than 10 plants with more than 1 million tags and more than 200 clients. Ignition helps Reynolds achieve its critical success factors, such as compliance with technology standards, security, scalability, and dealing with legacy control solutions. I can't emphasize enough how important security is inside that list as well. It's one of the things that is easy to overlook as an organization, but for anyone who's doing things at an enterprise scale, having a technology standard that has a strong focus on security is a really important piece and something that supports modern security standards and can play nicely with the policies that are already in place, rather than having to carve out special security rules for unsecured networks, specifically around a control system or a SCADA or an IIoT system or an MES system. Despite the challenges that they faced, Reynolds has scored big wins, such as cost savings, reduction in waste, and product rework. They've established a platform for growth and innovation. They have they have the agility to work with new technologies that are coming to the forefront, and they've had stellar financial results. In fact, at one point, their stock had gone up about 600% in 10 years. In short, ignition has become a critical enterprise technology for Reynolds. It's helped them transform themselves into a world-class operation, even more so than they were already.